In addition to just the fact that these deaths, these horrific deaths happen, another sort of centerpiece of this is this fetish website and this fetish lifestyle. You talked to Joseph Ryan's mom about his choices, his lifestyle. A lot of people may not know much about this fetish website, but that also is one of the distinguishing things about this particular case that I think perhaps drew a lot of attention to a case that maybe people wouldn't have had on their radar.
I think just the audacity that someone would try, and keep this in mind, Christine Banfield, at one point, she was a nurse who treated sexual assault patients. And so Brendan is accused of setting his wife up for this sexual fantasy role play scenario. They use the language rape fantasy. So you're setting up your wife, who is a prior sexual assault nurse, for that. And it's just raising a lot of questions. You know, when she was killed, she was a nurse at a pediatric hospital. So I think there's that level of, why would you do that? Like, how much, you know, what's going on here?
And that is part of this elaborate plot that we heard so much about. This didn't they didn't wake up one morning and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Based on what we heard during this trial, Juliana and Brendan, they've been going back and forth for quite a while to figure out how to carry this out, including the visits to the gun range. Right.
So their relationship, it started in August of 2022, I believe. So Juliana joined the family in 2021. In 2022, in August of 2022, Juliana says that relationship began with Brendan Banfield. She, you know, when she was testifying, did not explain how the relationship started. We only found out how it may or may not have started through Brendan Banfield's testimony, where he said that Juliana initiated it. She was pressuring him. She was making comments about how she had dated or was trying to date people with similar names, similar appearance. So,
which he loved, apparently, when he was recounting that sort of dynamic.
But what's interesting here is that the power dynamic between the two of them was not something that either side really got into. She's an au pair, right? You come to live with someone, right? Your boss has much more power than you have. And so I wonder if that also, in addition to all of these details that the jurors heard, they said, wait a minute, the power really was in the hands of Brendan Banfield in this relationship, not Juliana Magalhães. Now, she owns her actions, but in terms of the dynamic of who controlled what, he really was in control.
And I think that goes back to the conversation of the fact that Brendan's mother was paying for her legal fees. So while she didn't speak and talk about the story she presented on the stand when she testified, she was being represented by Brendan's family. She is from Brazil. She does not have family here. So her family is the Banfield family. And so she's, you know, she's kind of stuck there and relying on them. She mentioned how she was relying on Teresa, Brendan Banfield's mother, to pay her commissary, to connect her with her family, to pay for those phone calls. So, you know, there's a lot of heavy reliance on the Banfield family. And it wasn't until she took that plea deal that the money cut off and she then turned to the journalists. But if you want to go back to that plan, they start their relationship in August of 2022. In October is when she says Brendan came to her with this plan, this elaborate plan to get rid of his wife because he said divorce wasn't an option. He didn't want to have to worry about custody of their little girl, and he didn't want to have to worry about the money. And, you know, who knows what that means, but he said
Which
divorce
a lot of people question. They're like, wait, what? You think this is the better option than just simply getting a divorce?
Right, and that's according to her testimony, right? And, you know, I think it's important to keep in mind what the prosecutor said at the end. You may not believe Juliana, you may not believe Brendan Banfield. It's going to come down to who do you believe more in this case.
And we know that all Brendan said in response to these questions about whether or not he murdered his wife was, that's just absolutely crazy.
Right.
That's it.
Those were his words. It is interesting that as they made this case about aggravated murder, which suggests that you are involved, you have planned in some way, you have researched it. But the thing that stood out to me is he knew that his wife had a blood clotting disorder. So if you have a blood clotting disorder and you are being stabbed multiple times, it is very difficult for you to eclipse that, right? Because you already have a blood clotting disorder. He knew this.
And he also knew that she was a prior sexual assault nurse, right? Like, he knew a lot of things. They were together for, I believe, almost 20 years. They had been together through so much. They had a child together. They lived in New York. They moved down here for his job, and she came with him and then was able to find a job. That came up during his testimony, that she had done a lot for him, and we didn't get to hear a lot about her during this trial, but we do know a little bit about her, and what we know and what happened, I mean, it's absolutely horrifying.
Was that by design, though? Did they want to take her out of this a little bit to put more of the emphasis on who Brendan was and who,
maybe,
Juliana was?
Right. And they didn't really touch character here. And one of our legal experts, I asked him about that, and he was saying you don't need to go after the character of Christine or defend that. Now, they could have, when they brought up the conversation of how she was having affairs, that was an opportunity where the prosecution could have come up and presented a witness who could have said otherwise, or the defense could have provided a witness that said she was having affairs, but no evidence was provided to indicate that she was. And again, she is not on trial here. At the end of the day, she's not the one on trial. Joseph Ryan is not on trial. It is Brendan Banfield on trial here.
Brendan Banfield on trial, and Brendan Banfield found guilty of 4 counts today. Guilty on aggravated murder of Christine Banfield, of Joseph Ryan, guilty of using a firearm in commission of a felony, and child endangerment.
Again, we are